But that's the story. You're going to have to get used to that. If you're going to cut wages, then there are some people on lower wages who will say, well, why am I going to work, right? And IBEC also have the script written for these people. They said, Irish social welfare must be fundamentally reappraised. And again, notice the awesome certainty for how has to be cut. 3% has to be cut off social welfare. They also, of course, want to attack the public service. And you'll find, I mean, these words that, just remember, somebody had to invent these words and put it into media. Bloated, inefficient, overpaid. The reason why they're going on about the public sector, it's important to understand this, and for anybody tempted on these arguments, 85% of trade union members in Ireland are in the public sector. Okay? Very few trade unionists now in the foreign-owned multinationals. So when they attack the inefficient, privileged people in the public sector, that is code for having a go at trade unionists. That's what this is all about. And the aim is, by attacking these organised trade unionists, to reduce the wages of everybody in this country. Now, what's obviously been happening, therefore, is the government has just picked up the script. They literally write this stuff down, and the government has been doing exactly what they've been told by IBEC. IBEC says cut wages by 10%. Brian Cahan turns up at a meeting of Dublin Chamber of Commerce and says the living standards will have to be reduced between 10 and 12%. They want a cut of social welfare. You can imagine when that comes up to John Gormley in the Green Party, how he agonises, how are we going to pull this one across? So he talks to these political consultants, and they come up with an idea: get rid of the Christmas bonus for social welfare recipients, and it won't be seen as a cut. In fact, it's a cut of 5% on social welfare. The only thing the government has done, this is what's awesome about this crisis, the only thing the government has done is to bail out the banks. It has done nothing about unemployment. It's as if it's just disappeared, done nothing about it. The only basis of Irish economic policy at the moment is to bail out the banks. Now, I want to say a few things about the banks, because it's important to understand how they work. There are 6 banks in Ireland, right? The aim of these banks, if you like, the sort of great ambition, was to hit the 1 billion profit. Okay? AIB did it before. AIB did it before anybody else. They're in fact up to 2 billion. But the aim over the last number of years was to get that magic 1 billion figure. In the past, the banks went about this in amazingly crude ways. I mean, if you went to have your money changed, if you're going on holidays or you wanted to send money to relatives abroad, they overcharged you deliberately and systematically. AIB, for example, made about 60 million extra just on illegally overcharging people. They ran a scam about dirt tax. Famously, if you were a sort of slightly upper middle class person in Tralee, you come into the bank, winked at the bank manager and says, I'm from the Seychelles, and here's my address. Fine, we take in your deposit and nothing is paid. Irish taxpayer robbed of 100 million through that scam. But the big time came when Ireland joined the euro. And this is really what, if you like, made the banks. In 1999, Ireland joined the euro, and that transformed the bank's operations. Up to 1999, the banks could only lend out how much, if you like, Irish depositors had left in the bank. So they were restricted in how much they could lend out. But after 1999, when Ireland joined the euro, they got access to international monetary markets. Think of a drug pusher, rather than a bank. Just imagine a bank as a drug pusher. And initially, you're a small-time dealer selling a little bit of cannabis to your mates and so on in an area. But then after a while, you discover if you want to make this big, you want to get a big consignment of cocaine, have it available, organise distribution networks. This is how you make it big time. And the banks are exactly the same. And by the way, that is being charitable to relatively decent drug pushers compared to banks. So they set about pushing up the amount of money in the Irish economy. Now, let's just come to the figure in a minute. But let's say, who are these people? We say banks. That's a word. But who are these people, right? And let's just give a few figures. 6 banks in Ireland, okay? There are 70 people on the board of directors of those banks. But a board of directors is composed of 2 sorts of people. One is the non-executive director, often hangers-on of the political establishment, Dermot Gleeson, former Attorney General, other politicians who've been on boards of directors before, but the really crucial people are the executive directors. There are only 20 executive directors of banks in Ireland. In other words, just 20 people made the fundamental decisions that we are now all suffering for. That's an extraordinary, if you like, indictment of capitalism. Just 20 people, what was on in their heads, they made decisions that are now so dramatically affecting us. Here are about 13 or 14 of them, right? These are the ones, these are the names of the people who ran the three biggest banks. A few things you should notice. None of them thought they should be paid less than €1 million. Absolutely not. You're a bank director, you deserve $1 million, right? That's how it's put. But not only that, this column here is their pension. Okay? Now, let's take Mr. Goggin. On nearly $4 million, he's disgraced. He made a complete mess of it. The ruling class sometimes have to sacrifice a few other individuals, so he was shuffled off. But he's now on a pension of €626,000. That is equivalent to the wage of 17 average workers. Okay? Mr. Sheehy, the man who's writing the IBEX script, he's living on a pension of $500,000. That's equivalent to what 15 workers in this country live on for their wage. Okay? So this is the arrogance at the heart of the decision. So what did these people do? Essentially, to come back to the point I was making, up to 1999, they would have raised about 31 billion from foreign funds. In the next 9 years, that increases by 5 times. Like the drug pusher, they've increased their supply lines, and we're now up to 150 billion. And that 150 billion pumped into the Irish economy is what essentially creates the property boom and the boom in speculation. Okay, how did they get away with this? And this is, you have to understand the psychology of Irish capitalism. I mean, Irish capitalism operates on a sort of culture of saying, we were originally oppressed by the Brits, and that gives us a right to be cute and smart and pull a few scams to get over on everybody else. That's the basic psychology of Irish capitalism. And what essentially happens here is, in Ireland, you have regulations. I mean, regulations are, you can go to any website, you see the regulation, it's supposed to be transparency, but in reality, that's part of the scam. It's to make it look like things are regulated. That's not how it's actually played. And when you look at how it's played, let's just take this one here. The elite within the system told the banks, go right ahead. A bank, for example, is supposed to keep some amount of reserves, right? A small amount of reserves while it's lending out. Irish banks had the lowest level of reserves in Europe, right? The level of debt compared to the reserves left in the banks was the lowest of any country in Europe. And that happened because this country is built on a philosophy of neoliberalism. It's about pretend to regulate, but it's a scam. And if you look through statements here, you can find it very simply, right? The best one is this one here, a white paper in 2004 called, because you have to play the cute game, it's called Better Regulation. People have read George Orwell. So, white paper on better regulation says clearly, we will regulate as lightly as possible. And then it goes on to say, unless there are alternatives. And the alternative is co-regulation, which means we'll regulate the banks, and the banks will regulate the banks, and there'll be no problem. Right? So this was all encouraged and developed by the Irish neoliberal elite. Okay, before I started this book, I didn't actually know one thing about how the IFSC operated. I never really figured how Ireland fitted into the whole casino economy that's become global capitalism these days. Ireland, in fact, is one of the main centres of global speculation.